Astrology helps us discover our light. It gives us the language to reflect and helps us make sense of our lives. But what if we're only looking at one side of the story? What if astrology, for all of its insights, is sometimes used to reinforce how we want to see ourselves, without questioning whether that view is the full picture? What happens when the version of ourselves we project through the chart becomes a mask? Hi, I'm Sophie. I make videos about astrology from a psychological and archetypal perspective. If you're looking to explore your birth chart more deeply and uncover the patterns that might be hiding in plain sight, then you can book a private reading with me. Link is in the description below. I'm going to be referencing The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler in this video, which is an incredible book on planetary archetypes and their combinations. It's particularly insightful when it comes to exploring the shadow side of the planets, which is exactly what we're going to be diving into today. The planets represent timeless archetypes that live within the human psyche, reflecting both our highest potential and our most unconscious patterns. We'll be walking through the shadow qualities of each of the traditional 7 planets, from the ego inflation of the Sun to the escapism of Jupiter, and how we can work with them consciously. The goal isn't to reject or repress these parts, but to integrate them so we can actually grow and not just spiritualize our coping mechanisms. In psychology, the shadow refers to whatever parts of ourselves we've repressed or denied. These parts don't disappear, they simply live underground, shaping our reactions in ways we don't often understand. Astrology helps us track these hidden dynamics. Because every planet speaks to a different function of the self, it also shows how that function can be distorted, how it can become compulsive, reactive, or disconnected from consciousness. When we explore our own birth charts and look closely at each planetary placement, we begin to see not only the gifts and strengths associated with the planet, but also its potential distortions, the qualities that are more complex, less flattering, and sometimes even destructive. By becoming more curious about these traits, we can shed some light on how they might be operating in our lives. We can notice where that planet's energy might be getting blocked, exaggerated, projected, or misunderstood. This is why astrology, at its best, shouldn't just be a mirror for what we like about ourselves. It shouldn't only validate our strengths or feed into our sense of specialness, not because we don't have gifts, but because those gifts only become truly meaningful when they're grounded in our awareness of our weaknesses. When using astrology for shadow work, the planets are inviting us to ask the following questions. How does this placement behave when I'm on autopilot? What patterns emerge when this energy is left unchecked? And what are we avoiding by only focusing on its strengths? That's where transformation can truly begin, not in denial, delusion, or distortion, but in real integration. The sun is the core of identity, our conscious will, purpose, and drive. It's the constant light that allows vision, clarity, and perception to occur. It represents vitality, direction, and the sense of who we're becoming. But as Ren Butler describes, the sun in its shadow expression can become overbearing and domineering, with a tendency towards self-centeredness and self-importance. This is where we identify too much with the ego. We may crave attention, admiration, or status in order to feel validated. We confuse recognition with a sense of selfhood, believing that if we're not being seen or heard, then we somehow don't exist. We may even overpower others in an attempt to feel in control, assuming our role is central to everyone else's life. Shadow work with the sun doesn't ask us to eradicate the ego, but to see it, understand it, and work with it, acknowledging that the ego is here to show us our fears and desires, but shouldn't be running the show. Because without awareness, the sun can blind as easily as it can illuminate. Butler describes this awareness as the conscious ego, the impulse towards autonomy, light, spirit, creative willpower, and self-expression. The moon speaks to our instincts, emotions, and attachments to comfort. It represents the inner world, the place where we go to feel safe and understood. Butler describes the moon shadow as excessive emotionality, reactivity, dependency, and a tendency to over-nurture in ways that can disempower others. This is where we rely too deeply on the need for safety. We may get stuck in cycles of reactivity, responding to the present as if it were the past, continually picking at old wounds, and allowing emotional habits to become our identity. Shadow work with the moon means noticing when we're being driven by emotion instead of being guided by it, and when we're choosing comfort over growth. It asks us to nurture the abandoned parts of ourselves, but not to get stuck in the past or stagnate in the present. Butler frames this awareness as becoming more rooted in family and community, nurturing these connections without using them to seek safety at the expense of our own personal growth, as well as deepening our capacity to feel, process, and reflect on our emotions. The process of shadow work itself is a lunar quality, so working with the moon can deeply strengthen our intuition, inner voice, and depth of our own souls. Mercury is the part of us that thinks, speaks, learns, and interprets. It's our internal narrator, guiding our perception, processing information, and responding to sensory stimuli. Butler describes Mercury's shadow as an overly rational or one-sided point of view, nervous system overstimulation, and excessive talking. This is where we identify too heavily with the mind. We may over-explain, talk our way around the truth, or use words as armor. Cleverness and busyness becomes a mask, and sometimes we'll keep our minds in constant motion to avoid emotional stillness. Shadow work with Mercury asks us to slow the internal chatter, deepen our acceptance of the unknown, and stay open to perspectives beyond our own. Butler suggests that when Mercury is integrated, it can help us perceive higher truths and share them with others, encouraging curiosity, insights, and the humility to ask questions without immediately needing to answer them. Venus is the expression of love, values, and desires. It's the part of us that seeks harmony, friendship, and beauty. Butler describes Venus's shadow as pretentious, shallow, vain, self-indulgent, and lazy. This is where we rely too much on pleasure. In Venus's shadow, we might people please, perform socially, or avoid conflict to maintain likability. We may also lack the discipline to say no to things that feel good in the moment but cost us in the long run. Or we rely too heavily on living in the moment and forget to consider our future selves in the process. Shadow work with Venus asks us to let go of the fantasy versions of our desires and stay present for the real thing. It asks us where our desires are leading us. Is it towards fulfillment or into old patterns? Butler sees the integration of Venus as an expression of higher beauty and love, romantic euphoria, the transcendent beauty of nature, and the harmonious cooperation of all things. Mars is all about our drive, assertion, and direction. It's the instinct to act, defend, and initiate. Butler describes Mars's shadow as self-gratification, excessive force, aggression, and the misuse of power. This is where we identify too strongly with the primal self. We might lash out, dominate, or manipulate, or we might suppress our anger entirely, only to turn it inwards as self-criticism or passive aggression. Shadow work with Mars is about reclaiming anger as information. Not all anger is a problem. Anger is like a boundary, a signal, or a call to act. So we need to ask where the anger is coming from and how we can channel it in a way that creates instead of destroys. Butler describes Mars's integration as the pursuit of personal goals and the instinct to protect in danger. He suggests that even conflict can deepen the stories of our lives as long as we use it to evolve rather than repeat. Jupiter governs growth, generosity, beliefs, and optimism. It's the visionary part of us that connects the dots and seeks the bigger picture. But Butler describes Jupiter's shadow as pride, arrogance, entitlement, and spiritual inflation. This is where we fall into excess. We may be unwilling to see nuance or accept uncertainty, bypass pain with positivity, or hold so tightly to beliefs that we shut out anything that can contradict it. Shadow work work with Jupiter means embracing humility. It's about the willingness to say, I don't know, and sitting with the discomfort instead of rushing to find meaning. Butler describes Jupiter's higher function as the integration with the larger whole, an uplifting force that seeks to make things whole, more expansive, and more conscious. Saturn is the ruler of time, structure, discipline, and responsibility. It's the part of us that wants to build something long-lasting and become masterful. Butler describes Saturn's shadow as a force of repression, restrictions, boundaries, and separation. This is where we become too identified with reality. We might fear failure, fall into shame, or compensate with hard discipline. We could overfunction to feel worthy or underfunction to avoid risk. Shadow work with Saturn means facing the limits that we carry, real or imagined, asking us which ones help us grow and which ones are just keeping us small. So it asks the question, what are we avoiding because we fear we'll fail? And what might shift if we commit slowly, seriously, and with intention? Butler describes Saturn's higher function as the development of wisdom and maturity, responsibility, integrity, grounded humility, and most importantly, the patience to build something meaningful over time. Each planet is a representation of a higher order that governs us, and each one has something very powerful to teach. There's gold in all their lessons, but it's not found by clinging to the light. It's uncovered by meeting the shadow. Shadow work isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about integrating what's been left out, shedding light on what we've disowned and bringing it back to conscious awareness. When we stop splitting ourselves into good and bad, light and dark, right and wrong, we begin to experience the kind of wholeness that actually transforms us. So which planet's shadow do you find yourself grappling with the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future content. For more on this theme, you can check out my video on the dark side of the benefics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.